Good morning, YouTube. It's going to be another long, cold day today out in the field. So we got a lot of cold winter weather coming up, and I just wanted to kind of talk about a couple things. I know that this last couple years in the field that I'm in, working on RVs, doing RV tech work, I've noticed there's a lot more people that are living in campers, and I run into a lot of the same questions and issues over and over again. My furnace isn't working. How can I heat up my camper if it's not running, on the furnace? Or, if you don't have a fireplace in the camper, which is going to keep it decent, but in extreme temperatures like what we're getting down here now, you're probably not going to be able to get it as cold as or as warm as you want it just with a fireplace. One thing that I tell a lot of people is if you got a 30 amp service, you can't run a whole lot of heat element type things in the camper, like space heaters and stuff like that. And you do want to be really, really careful about what type that you use. I recommend the ones that it look like an old school radiator for an older house. They basically heat up an oil in them, and then that oil will rise to the top of the little radiator deal and kind of just exude the heat instead of having like an open flame or those really red hot looking, when you plug them in, they glow like an orange color. Or even, the little mini propane space heaters like Mr. Buddy. I mean, I'm not saying not to use them, but it's just not ones that I recommend. I'd be worried about things like carbon monoxide or some of the older ones that if you knock them over, they don't turn off on their own. But anyway, I mean, living in a camper, you're going to have a very survivalist mentality. You need to be able to think about things like, how could you charge your phone if the power goes out? How can I heat my camper if, my furnace quits or I run out of LP, in the middle of the night or something. So it's not a bad thing to think about, just having these different types of choices at least. When you are plugging in, your space heaters and stuff like that, you want to make sure that you're kind of using different ends of the camper. And I'm trying to think of how I can say that to explain it the best way. On one side of your camper, you're going to have maybe a couple of outlets that are protected by a GFCI, which is ground fault circuit indicator, or ground fault circuit. It'll have the indicator light and all that, probably in your bathroom or somewhere near your kitchen sink or whatever. That one, if you trip it, you're going to have to reset it at that, that location. And then you're going to have other outlets in the camper that are tied into the breaker on your main distribution panel that says general, usually like general or receptacle. REC or GEN is how it's going to be written on the inside. Depends on who you buy your camper from as far as the manufacturer goes. They all write it all different. But having two of them in a larger camper, run them kind of low, see what see what kind of heat it puts off, to start with before you crank it up and, really get that heat moving. Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to do that. I wouldn't crank them both up as high as they'll go in the beginning. When you go out and go purchase it, test run it a couple times. Don't just go full blast into it. Test run it, see what you got going on. I just want you guys to be safe out there. I want you to understand, that living in a camper, I know it's not the most ideal thing, and these economic times we're having right now are really hard. I mean, you can't afford to eat beef and buy a house right now if you're, low class, middle class, like, most of us are. But it's still important you guys stay warm and protect your families, and stay alive. So I get it. You got to do what you got to do. It's cheaper to live in a camper, than it is to buy a house right now. If your credit can, support it and you got enough money to support it. And I know there's people out there who are, you know, they got enough money, they're just using them as a toy. You know, they're carrying them out to campgrounds, they're doing a lot of traveling, they're you know, a little bit better off than a lot of people are. But I don't think a lot of people really understand how crazy it is out there right now. And like I say, I've been doing this for a couple of years, and this is the most I've seen where people are living in campers this past year and a half. It's been crazy. People selling their campers or selling their houses to go live in a camper because they can't afford the house payment. You know, and a camper payment's about half of that, maybe a third of that, you know. But then you got to think about things too, like lot rent. You know, you're never going to own that lot that you're staying in, you know, but you're still going to have to pay that rent on top of, you know, your payment for your camper. So, you know, you're making $600-700 a month payments on the camper, and you're making sometimes $400 or $500 a month for the lot rent. You know, you're still paying out as much as I'm paying out for an apartment where I got plenty of room, I got, you know, heat, and if anything breaks, I can get it fixed from the company, you know, that I'm renting from. So living in a camper comes with a lot of maintenance. Even the best, most well-built camper is going to require a lot of maintenance, you know, and that stuff's not cheap. And if you're not handy, it's not going to be easy on you. Even the most simple things in these campers cost a couple $100, and then you got to pay for the labor on top of that. But anyway, guys, you know, I don't want to beat a dead horse. You know, you guys stay warm, figure it out as best you can. Like I say, get your space heaters, plug them in, test them out, you know, check it out, see what your camper's capable of. If you're going to have one, have to use one, it's going to have to just be what it's going to be. And I want you guys to stay safe out there, you know, stay safe, stay alive, keep your families protected, and we'll see you in the next video. Okay, bye.